All right, so thank you so much for everyone that's joined so far for today's webinar on the topic of personas and how you get started with buyer personas. Today's webinar is going to be hosted and presented by Steve Robinson, the founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. So without further ado, take it away, Steve.
Excellent. A little bit of housekeeping. Be sure to post questions into the chat. We'll be sure to cover them at the end. This webinar will be recorded, so you will get a copy of it along with any resources we mentioned, including templates at the end. A little bit about me, for those of you who don't know me, I started my career in software development, transitioned over to marketing about 15 years ago. Founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. I'll mention that in a minute. I love to teach. I teach for UWM School of Continuing Ed, as well as basically any chance I get to share knowledge. I am married with 3 young children. I love them dearly. I hope to God they don't interrupt this webinar. A little bit about Brilliant Metrics. We are a B2B focused digital first agency. The reason why our clients love us or come to us is because we really help them continuously move forward and get to that next level, whether that's in capabilities, in knowledge, in technology, and most importantly, in results. Okay, so today we're talking about personas. And personas, if you think about marketing as a whole, our objective as marketers is really to get the right message in front of the right audience at the right time to drive business, right? And personas can be instrumental in helping with the first two. So helping making sure that you're drafting and creating that right message and that it is appropriate for that right audience. It is this plus sign where personas really, really shine. So let's talk about how that is. And I should add, buyer's journey is really where you get into the right time. And that's a whole separate webinar. It's coming. So what is a persona? A persona is a single fictitious person representing a larger audience. So the idea here is you have one individual that doesn't actually exist, but that you can relate to and empathize with when you're making decisions. They are fictitious. They are not real. And we'll talk a little bit about names in a moment. Why are personas valuable? Well, the number one reason is they give you an easy source of empathy. And so when you have a persona in front of you, it allows you to empathize with an individual. We're all wired with something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are neurons in our brain that lets us look at other humans and feel what they're feeling and think something along the lines of what they're thinking. If you can look at a loved one and know what's going through their head, it's because of those mirror neurons. Those are innate at an animal level and built within our brains. We can use those, though, as marketers, as salespeople, to really drive better decision making by getting inside the heads of our audience. But you need a tool to do that because you don't have a member of your audience sitting across from you at your desk all day. That would be weird. Personas give us that ability to do that, to jump inside of that persona. They give us a shared vocabulary. If you get in the habit of using persona names around your office, they become a shorthand. When I talk with my colleagues about Andrea, they know that I'm talking about the persona Andrea, and they immediately get a clear picture of what that means without having me to describe, oh, well, that is a marketing director, sometimes manager, but usually director, sometimes maybe even higher than director at a mid-sized B2B company, and they're most worried about this and that. You know, I can just say Andrea, and it comes with all of that information. So it's a really great vocabulary tool. They provide quality control. If you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there, right? And so if you create content without a persona or a target audience really well, clearly defined, you don't know if you've succeeded in creating the right content. You don't have the ability to do that check at the end. And so personas allow you to check your work against your target audience. You hold up your persona, you hold up your work, and you go, yeah, this ought to work. And you don't know for sure until you put that content out there. But at least you're looking at the content through the eyes of the audience that you're producing it for. Without using those mirror neurons, without using that empathy muscle, it's much harder to know whether you're way off base with content. We've all done it. We've produced something that, you know, in retrospect, looking back the next day, we go, why the heck did I ever think that was going to work? This prevents those moments. And they can foster creativity. You know, if you give an artist a completely blank canvas with no parameters whatsoever, they'll freeze. Like they need to have a spark or an idea or some constraints in order to really produce the best work. Constraints breed creativity and innovation. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but there's been studies and plenty of people who've written about this. If you put a persona up in front of you, knowing this is the audience that I am creating for, it, and you jump inside that head, it will spark creativity. It will spark ideas. And those ideas are going to be a lot better than an uninformed idea, because you know your constraint, you know your audience, you know where you're going. So these are just some of the benefits and from a big picture perspective of why we are firm believers in personas at Brilliant Metrics, and why we really push every single client to have a well fleshed out set of personas. So when I talk about a persona, I flashed a screenshot of one really quick, but let's talk about some of the core elements that are really required. You need a name and you need a face. You can't engage those mirror neurons without a face. And it has to be a real photograph face, not like a little blurb of a silhouette or a cartoon. Grab a stock photo, grab an image off the web, ideally somebody that you don't actually know, because otherwise you're going to get all that baggage with that, right? So this should be a photo of a real person that is believably your target audience here. The name also needs to be believable. The worst thing you can do is create a persona called Betty Buyer or Finance Fred. The problem with those personas is that nobody's actually named Finance Fred, right? So you're never going to encounter somebody with that name. It takes that believability out, and now you've broken the illusion, right? And no longer can you suspend disbelief and engage those mirror neurons. And it needs to be fictitious. Another mistake that I've seen clients and prospects make that I've talked to is they will take, well, you know, our best client, his name is Fred, so I'm going to use Fred as my persona. Well, now you've created two interpretations of Fred the persona. Those people that actually know Fred and are going to interpret it based on their firsthand knowledge of Fred as a customer. And those people who don't know Fred that are going to interpret it based on what's on the paper. Those two interpretations could be the same or they could be different, and you have no way of knowing it because you know Fred. So you want to start with a fictitious person. That doesn't mean that you want to ignore everything you know about Fred when you're creating the persona, but don't name it the same as an existing customer. That sets the organization up with two different ideas of who this person is. You need a background in demographics. So don't go overboard here. I've seen some marketers go crazy and write up the huge backstories to their personas. That doesn't help, but you need enough that you feel like this is a real person. So throw in a school that they went to and graduated from, give them a location on the map. You know, are they married? Do they have kids? What life stage are they at? What's going on in their world? Just a little slice of some background. A finite age is good. And again, you're making that persona that much more believable by setting these parameters. One section that I really like on a persona for the ones that we've developed is a section on how to make their lives easier. This is all of those little things that you have found that you can do for this person that just, you know, sparks joy and brings them extra value. Ways in which they have friction points or pain points that you can quickly and easily remedy. Maybe they have nothing to do with your product or service directly, but they're tangential. And these are little ways that you can make their lives better. You can surprise, you can delight, etc. Having that documented in some place really helps you get inside that person's head. A day in the life. I'm sure we've all been there, especially during this as we come out of this pandemic, right? Where you're juggling and things are crazy. This is a very different environment from somebody who sits in a quiet office all day. It's a very different environment from a field worker who's out in the out in the working with customers all day long, and their office is their pickup truck. Capturing that slice of life is really important. So walk through a normal day, a routine that the person would follow, whether it's B2B or B2C. It can be hugely valuable. You want to make sure that you capture two other key areas: frustrations and aspirations. So frustrations are the areas of this person's world that cause them the most pain. Now, these frustrations don't have to be frustrations that your product directly remedies. These can be frustrations that are tangential to your product or service. These are in the same area of life or work that your product or service is usually, but they're still pain points. So if the frustration is that they never have enough time, or a frustration is that they've got challenges training staff. Well, if you're not a training company, but you know that they have a frustration in training staff, you can make sure that your product or service comes with some of the best documentation and it's easiest to hand off. These things will influence your business model. They'll influence your product or service offering. They'll influence your marketing, your content, your sales, if you can really capture where all of those, not necessarily all of those, but the biggest of those frustrations are. So human beings are motivated by two things, right? Pain and pleasure, right? We avoid pain and we go towards the things that feel good. Your frustrations are your pain, the things that people are looking to avoid. Your aspirations are the pleasure. These are the things that they are going towards. If you're B2B, you want to capture your persona's career goals, where they want to go in life. Many roles are top out roles. These are roles that people go into and they don't want to climb the corporate ladder. They want to go to work every day. They want to do a great job. They want to get some recognition along the way, and then they want to go home. And then some roles, these are people that are ladder climbers. They're aspirationally going to end up in the C-suite. That's the direction they're going, and that's where they want to head. Document that. What do they get bonuses on? In the B2C world, how do these people want to be better? What values are they judged against? Where do they succeed at home or at work? Get those aspirations down, because again, if you can understand how you can relate your product or service back to where your persona wants to go, it will give you a ton of content ideas. It will give you an opportunity to make sure that your copy is reading the right way and hitting the right buttons. So document the aspirations that you know about. It's a really good idea to capture, where do these people get their information, especially today where no two information sources are going to say the same thing. So where do they go? What do they read? What do they watch? What groups are they a member of? Where are they getting their content? Where are they getting their fodder from? This isn't going to be a comprehensive list. We'll talk about that later. There's a definitely value in creating a comprehensive list, but this gives you an opportunity to get a feel for the types of content or media that this person consumes. So B2C, you're probably looking at a mixture of education and entertainment. B2B, you're looking at trade pubs and core business resources that the person might be engaging in. Technology aptitude. This is not an ageist type of play here. Really what we're talking about is, of your audience, where do they sit on that technology spectrum? And that could have nothing to do with, life stage or age. This could have everything to do with just the environment. There are people in trades that are really low on the technology aptitude spectrum, are still fairly young, and then there are people who are, in academic or high tech fields of study that are going to be way up on that technology aptitude, regardless of their age or career level or life stage. You want to capture that technology aptitude. This is becoming more and more important as we are looking at creating more digital experiences. So if you're targeting an audience that is low on the technology aptitude spectrum, and you are trying to create a digital experience, you need to put extra effort into making that seamless and smooth and easy. You also can't throw extra bells and whistles and complications into it. So versus somebody who's maybe further and higher on that technical aptitude scale, that at that point you can throw the kitchen sink at them and know they can take it in stride. So once you have these core areas documented, we'll talk about how to research that in a second. Then you can start to flesh out the rest of your personas. So this is what makes a good persona, but let's talk about the process. Starting out, how many personas do you need? Every persona you create is essentially a new master you have to serve, right? You're not going to create personas that you never create content for. Focus on the personas that you do create content for. Focus on the personas that interact with your company and you're creating experiences for. Focus on the personas that your sales team is interacting with. Those are the personas you want to focus on, and you want as few as possible. Every time you add a persona, it's another person or type of person you need to keep in mind while you're going about your job. So the fewer, the better. That said, you're going to hit edges where it becomes important to create a new persona. One of the tools that we found is really beneficial in figuring out where to put those edges and when you need to add a persona is something called a persona matrix. So a persona matrix looks like this. It has personas down the left-hand side, and then it has your segmentation, how you segment your audience at a people level, and sometimes at a company level if you're B2B across the top. So those market segmentations are unique to you and your industry, but let's talk about what some of those might be. So in B2B, you'll often have industry segmentations and role segmentations. Those are the kind of the blanket that we have across all of our B2B personas. But you'll also likely have seniority. Sometimes a senior engineer is going to make decisions and act and want certain content very different from a junior engineer. That might result in two different personas. It may not. It depends on your business and whether or not those people approach you and your buying and your content differently. Company size. Sometimes somebody that works for a small business is going to act very differently from somebody who works for a big business. A lot of times we'll have an owner persona that is very important for small customers, but then when we get to bigger customers, the owner isn't even in the picture, and so they aren't a persona. And then we start looking at a GM, a plant manager, a project manager, an engineer, something along those lines. Technological maturity. Again, if you have a technical product, sometimes you have two different buying, two different types of buyers, two different types of customers when it comes to whether they are approaching the purchase through a technical lens or they're approaching the purchase through a non-technical lens. And sometimes that can be two people with the same job and two different backgrounds. When that happens, it can sometimes help to split that persona. Again, it depends on your business and what impacts you. And then finally, geography. This really comes into more international geography and culture differences than it does just in, what state are they in. If the people think the same and approach buying the same, they are the same persona, even if they're in different countries. It's only when how they think, what their values are, how they would approach content, how they'd approach the buyer's journey starts shifting pretty radically that you need to go and throw a different persona in there. B2C, here it's a little different. You're looking at more like age, income, lifestyle, or passion. This is going to be very different depending on the industry industry you're in. So if you sell bicycles, for example, you're going to have your competitive riders and then your non-competitive riders that they're passionate about other things. Or maybe you have your mountain bikers versus your racers versus your casual bicyclists. So what they're passionate about and how they apply your product to that passion is important. Now, that's different from building personas based on your product lines. That you should never do. You want to build your personas around their passion, their lifestyle, how they approach that buying decision differently. Geography and culture, we talked about that on the B2B capacity. Technology aptitude, again. One other area in B2C that we find is especially useful, and I don't do a ton of consulting in B2C, but what little I've done is core beliefs or political affiliations. There have been a number of studies in the last 5 to 10 years that show that somebody's political alignment or personal beliefs along those sort of core ideological lines of conservative versus liberal, that actually changes buying behavior significantly, because it's a frame of reference on life that takes on a whole lot of different different lenses to the world. And so if you can nail that and find that there is a core difference in how they approach your product, that's a good thing to include. It could be that it makes no difference, in which case, great, it's one less persona you've got to create, right? Every time you split your personas up, that introduces that much more complexity. Your goal when you're creating this matrix is to ideally have as many shared X's as possible, because you want to create as few personas as you can get away with and have them share as many of your different segments as possible. Only split where you know that a Gordon at a B2B company is totally different from a Gordon at a B2C company, and now I've got to go and make two different personas. All right, let's talk about research. There are 3 types of persona research. The most obvious is first party. This is where you're getting information directly from your buyer. You are sitting there interviewing, you are surveying, you are capturing that information firsthand. That's powerful, but it's expensive, slow, and sometimes challenging to execute. The second is second party. That's where you're getting information from somebody within your company that has a close relationship with your persona, or somebody who's close at hand to the company, who has a close relationship with your buyer persona. And then you have third party. This is where you are trusting a third party altogether to either provide an anecdotal slice of life interview or write up on that persona or individuals who meet that match that persona, or where you're using statistical data from a third party in order to be able to inform your personas. So let's talk about first party. There are a number of ways you can get this data. The best 2 are probably interviews and surveys. I'd avoid focus groups. They result in groupthink, and they're not really the best use case in this scenario. I would say instead one-on-one interviews and individual surveys sent out to your existing customers can really help inform that research. When you send out that survey, you want to make sure half of that survey is really helping to understand where the edges are on your personas, what the boxes are. So that could be questions in a B2B capacity about their role. It could be questions about their industry. It could be questions about other information, or if they're not doing an anonymous survey, it would be questions about, it would just be who they are, and then you can tie that information back. If it's B2C, it's questions about their lifestyle, their beliefs, their income, marital status, etc., whatever they're willing to share. The second half of the survey is going to be understanding those core components that you want to put in there. So what are their frustrations? What are their interests? What are their aspirations? Avoid multiple choice, focus on putting open-ended questions, and just limit the volume of your survey to what you can tag and pull in. Other sources of information, Google Analytics can provide some information, but it's only as good as the segmentation of the data going in. So you want to look at core pages of your site that only certain personas would be looking at. If you don't have pages like that, then Google Analytics isn't a tool to help you with your research. LinkedIn can provide some great analytics if you put in the LinkedIn Insights tag on your website. That can provide some insights. Also, if you're publishing sponsored content or posts, you can go and look and see who's interacting with that content. And then one of my favorites is just social media snooping, right? So you've got followers and likes on your Facebook page, your LinkedIn page. You can go and take a customer list and key contacts that you think embody a particular persona, go and look them up and snoop on their individual personal and professional social media profiles, and start to take notes and build a picture of that persona. It's all anecdotal, but it all adds up. And that's the key, is that you're pulling multiple different anecdotal sources and adding them up into a picture of that individual. Second party research. This is secondhand information, but it's incredibly valuable, rich secondhand information. The key people you want to talk to within your organization is those that are literally on the front line talking every day to your customers and your prospects. So that's your frontline sales, not your sales managers, not your VP of sales, your sales people that are out there talking to these customers, your customer service individuals that are fielding the phone calls on a day-to-day basis. Those are the individuals that you really want to leverage for second party research. And the first thing you want to talk to them is you're bucketing your segments that you put your personas into. So describe to them how you broke them out, and ask them if, hey, I built a persona here named James. James is roughly this, this, and this, but not these other things. Do you think we can put everybody together into that James bucket or not? And get that clear first, and then dive into, what do you know about James? What is James? What are James's aspirations? What are his frustrations, etc.? Build a backstory before you have that meeting, so that you can really help that person identify with James first, and then ask to fill in the rest of the story. Finally, third-party research. So key sources here, on the B2B side, you're going to be looking at trade magazines and trade organizations. B2C side, you might be looking at other slice of life pieces, or interviews or stories. US Census data and Statista will help you nail down things like age, or other demographic type of information. The Census Bureau does have information on occupations, etc. My favorite, though, is getting these slice of life interviews here, where somebody went out and interviewed your target persona, and you get about 10 of these or 5 of these from various trade magazines and publications. This one's from a university, right? Go and grab those interviews and start to take notes off of those. The interviews will have some core common themes, and a lot of times people will talk about their goals, their aspirations, what they're proud of. They'll talk about a day in the life, and this will really help you fill in some of those gaps, and validate or invalidate what you're getting from customer service and sales, or from your surveys. Again, multiple data sources pulled together, lots of anecdotal information leads to something that's pretty reliable. So this is an example of a B2B persona, and this is actually the template that we're going to send out after the webinar. And see, we've got a background here. Again, not a ton of information, just enough for you to feel like you probably know Brian, right? B2B, you want to have a company profile to provide some grounding. Again, use a fictitious company here. Don't take a real company because that'll come with a bunch of baggage. And again, people who know that real company inside and out are going to have a leg up on the people that don't. So use a fictitious company here. Professional role and day in a life really kind of outline what this person's job is and what it feels like to be them. So here we have working 50 plus hours a week in the office, plus checking email on nights and weekends. Spends most of his time in the office in meetings and conference calls. You get a feel for what it's like to be Brian here. Frustrations and aspirations are hugely important. Again, what are the pain? What is Brian drawn away from, and what is Brian drawn to? How do you make his job easier? So here it says, provide clear data on how to manage assets, liabilities, and risks, make collateral shareable, speak to him in his language, use his vocabulary. He hates it when people use technical jargon or talk down to him. And then you've got some idea of where he hangs out, where he gets his information, how he uses social media. If this were a technical company, we'd want to have technical aptitudes. Actually, I think every company needs to have technical aptitudes today, and that's missing from this sample. And then key brand affinities. Why does he love your brand? Why does Brian love your company? I didn't have a slide on this, but it's something that we usually throw into our personas to help connect the dots between Brian, in this case, this Brian Hastings person, and you in your company. B2C looks pretty similar. We're going to change some of this stuff out. So we're less concerned about their business role, but we are concerned about their background. Finances can be really important, especially for larger life decision type purchases. We want to get social here. We've got that technology aptitude documented here. Hopes and dreams instead of aspirations, and worries and fears instead of frustrations. But it's the same kind of thing where what are you drawn to? What are you drawn away from? Other brand affinities. This can be really helpful both for two reasons. One, it understands what kind of brands is Hannah in this case drawn to, but also if you know these brands, you can kind of feel what it feels like to like these brands. You probably know somebody who loves these brands, right? And so having some of these other brand affinities documented, it's a great thing to survey and understand as well, can really help you empathize with that person. And again, what makes her life easier? Here we have what influences her or where she hangs out, kind of phrased a little bit differently. There are no hard and fast rules on how you need to create a persona. You just want to capture the core information that I covered earlier. Addendums. A persona's objective is really to maximize empathy. That's all it's trying to do. That said, you have a whole blank page on the opposite side that you can use for other uses. Ways that we've found to make use of that blank page are to list out in the B2B side all of the common job titles, because it's really hard to go and match a persona up against a person in a database if you don't know what job title they often have. Included in that would also be any differentiators beyond job title, right? So this is a engineer, but they also have to be an older engineer, or they have to be an engineer of with this particular, acumen, right? So I say common job titles, but really it should be, how do you spot this persona in the wild? Key triggers for buying. We have found it really useful on the back page of a persona to document what causes this person to enter the buying cycle. They go from, we love the see, think, do buyer's journey model, right? What causes them to go from see to think? There are triggers there. Document them, and they're different for every persona. So document the triggers for that persona that causes them to go from see to think. This is also a great place to document a comprehensive list of where they hang out. This is useful for media buying. It's useful for public relations. It's useful for networking. So what groups, organizations, events do they attend? What trade media do they read if they're B2B? If they're B2C, what entertainment and media do they consume? Who do they trust, etc. Get that stuff documented in one place so that it's really easy to reference. Those things, in a comprehensive list doesn't help you empathize. It's a big, long list to read. So keep it on the back side. The front side is the stuff that really exercises that empathy muscle. Okay, key point here. Perfect is the enemy of good. You are never going to have a perfect persona profile. You are always going to run into some information that contradicts the last bit of information that you had, and you're just going to have to pick a direction and go. If you were to spend maybe $100,000 on research, even then you're going to end up in situations where you can't make a generalization. Be specific, get something on paper, and get it out there, and get the feedback of as many people as you can on it, and then roll with it. Done is better than perfect. Having a persona that you're referring to that is 80 or 90% right will have immeasurable improvements on your work compared to not having a persona at all. Even just having your entire creative team, all your vendors, all of your contractors, your sales team, everybody on the same page about who we're working for. Even if that picture is slightly flawed, you have everybody rowing in the same direction, which is so much more powerful than everybody rowing in slightly different directions. So don't shoot for perfection, shoot for done. Okay. At this point, I've given you a ton of pointers and directions on how to create a persona, what is important in a persona, but how do you get that persona to be put to use? This is just a few of the times when it's really useful to whip out that persona and use it. Conducting meetings between sales and marketing. I mentioned personas being a great shorthand vocabulary. That's only true if you use them when you're talking. The sales team is constantly thinking about their customer. Giving them a framework to think about their customer in an empathetic, mirror neuron sort of way and pattern matching sort of way will give them superpowers and allow you as a marketer to better be able to work with them on creating sales collateral. Right? Now you guys are speaking the same language. Now when they ask for a brochure and you say, which persona is this brochure targeted at? They can throw out a name and you can say, oh, Andrea, great. We can create a brochure for Andrea. It's really, really helps you do your job better. It helps sales do their job better. And now you can say, hey, we're launching a new marketing campaign. This is what our campaign or program is based on. Here is our primary persona target. Here are other personas that are probably going to get hooked up in the campaign as well. And now sales is informed and knows exactly where you're going to get them leads. Drafting briefs and creative requirements. If you are creating a brief or a creative requirement to hand off to a third-party vendor, you are creating something internally to go out to an independent contractor, a partner agency, etc. Tack on a persona. Now we're 100% clear on who we're talking about creating this content for. Again, specifying sales collateral. If you get good at using this vocabulary with sales, they'll start using it back with you. And now when they ask for something, you're able to make sure that it's going to nail the audience because now you know exactly who it's for. In the process of writing, designing, or editing, if you are the person creating something, having a persona in front of you gives you the constraints that you need in order to create your best work. It also allows you to do some gut checks along the way. And sometimes it'll just make decision-making faster. Should I do this or this? Let me look at the persona. Oh, I should definitely do A. B is not going to work as well. You're done with your content, or your contractor came back with this great piece. Now you need to circulate it for feedback. Attaching a persona can be really beneficial in that instance as well. The same thing when you're doing your review or quality checking work. Pull out the persona, have the persona in front of you while you're checking the work, and you can go, yeah, this should work, or no, this is off base. It's amazing when you start to engage those mirror neurons and really get those empathy muscles cooking, how quickly you can see something that is not going to land right. And then finally, on the sales side, personas can be invaluable for training and coaching salespeople. Now you have a vocabulary on how to handle an Andrea, how to handle a Mike, how to handle a James, right? These people become real, and you can start to bucket the people that you're talking to into these different persona types and be able to give pointers and scripts and How to handle objections for an Andrea might be different from how to handle objections for a Mike for the same objection, right? So now you have that framework for all of those sales coaching and training opportunities. Hugely valuable. All right, that's all I got today. I bounced around a little bit. We do offer a full-blown persona workshop where we will walk through all of the steps to create a persona together. We can facilitate this engaging with your customer service and sales team if that's ever anything that you're interested in. But now I want to know what questions you have. We do have a small group here today, so please don't be afraid to ask very specific questions to you. I'd be excited to address those. Post your questions into chat, by the way.
I can start, Steve. I had one that popped up while you were going through. In the topic of number of personas, I know you had said that fewer number of personas is better, but how do you know if you have too few personas?
It's a great question. It's certainly a better problem to have too few than to have too many, because merging them is hard. But if you have too few personas, it will come out when you go to create content for a particular persona, or when you go to make a decision for a particular persona, and you feel like you could go two ways depending on whether they were this or that. Well, I don't know, that the persona doesn't give me enough information to make the decision because it really depends on if they are technical or non-technical, or it really depends on if they're married or single, or it really depends on if they are, really into mountain biking or really into road biking. And I can't make a decision. I can't empathize with this person because I don't know this key piece of information. When that comes up, that's when it's time to split that persona into two. Maybe not the first time, but if it comes up more than once, that's a pretty clear indicator that you don't have a high enough fidelity in your personas, and you need to amp it up. Any other questions? Great. Oh, yes. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Steve. Quick question on the personas. Your company obviously helped us do this in 2017, and we really haven't taken a look again. And it's almost, 4 years later with the pandemic and all of that. Is this something that we should be thinking about maybe putting budget towards for 2022?
Personas are ideally a living document. Particularly when you look at things like aspirations and frustrations, those things do shift over time. The other thing that happens is, your customer base shifts slowly over time as well. And sometimes, your persona representing a particular type of customer shifts because the people that you're attracting now are a little bit different. The other thing that changes over time is your understanding of your customer. As you start to become more customer centric and focused, as a lot of companies have in the last 5 to 10 years, suddenly they start noticing more and more things, and your institutional knowledge about your customer will increase. And so I definitely recommend revisiting them every, if not annually, every 3 to 5 years. And just taking a look at them and checking them. The good news is it's not nearly as much effort to go and review them as it is to build them in the first place. So yeah, I would say it probably makes sense to put a little bit of budget towards it, but really you're just looking at a couple of working sessions with sales and customer service, maybe a survey if you feel like it would be valuable to help refine that picture as things have changed. And in your industry where, yeah, the pandemic probably did change a lot of this stuff, it certainly wouldn't be a bad thing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, I think we'll wrap up. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the questions that were asked. And like I said, you'll get an email with the templates that I covered here and a chance to review the recording at your leisure. If you have any more questions, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email.